The big thing for me that kind of caused some of the issues was egg whites. I thought I was eating healthy because my cholesterol was high. I got my numbers done. My cholesterol was high, and I started doing egg whites. And then I thought I was eating all healthy, thinking this is great. And then I went in to see Doc, and he said, "Nah, that's not really how to do it."
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because if you eat an eggs are one of my favorite things. Eggs are something that is packed with protein and good fats, and they're a really good way to start the day, or really any time of the day. They're just a really good source. But if you separate out the components, then you start finding that they don't act the same way in the body. You don't get all of the benefits from them. They get treated a little differently by the body if you start separating out the whites and the yolks.
You'll be proud of me, Doc. I had 8 eggs yesterday, full eggs though, not just egg whites. So there you go. My egg count has gone way up, and like I said, that's been one of the contributing factors. Because even going in there, you worry, okay, well, he's going to cut out all the things I like. He's going to cut out all the sugars. He's going to cut out all the fats. But I actually like my diet more now than I did before, when I was kind of cheating and having more of the sugars. The sugars aren't good for you. They don't make you feel good. And then now I am eating a lot more meat because you said, hey, eat meat if it runs, swims, or flies, right?
That's what protein is. That's how I identify a protein. If it runs, swims, or flies, that's where protein comes from. At least in the easiest sense of it.
I mean, I don't chase my dinner down or anything. That would really probably be the ideal. Then I could burn some energy, and that's why hunters were always so thin. I know you hunt, but
yeah, maybe we should say if at one time it was able to run, swim, or fly. That's what you should be looking for.
Then you've got like a Rocky type situation where you're chasing the chicken around for agility, and then have to catch it, and then maybe cook it after that. It's
also just as beneficial to you if you buy them at the store.
Yes, I prefer that method. That's what I've been going with. Actually, one of the main places I've been getting a lot of my meats now is Sobe Meats, which is one of the sponsors for the station here. Great meat market, not too far away from my house. So so that's a great place to get stuff. But yeah, I wanted to have you in, Doc, because I wanted to talk about kind of how you deal. We didn't really talk about this, even though I've been actively seeing you through the first month of the year. But how you deal with people coming in? Okay, what should I do in the new year? What should I do with New Year's resolutions? Do you really, because you're really just trying to change the permanence of their diet and their health and their habits. It's not necessarily about, okay, go to Planet Fitness at the beginning of the year for 3 weeks and then get back to your sugary habits.
Right. Yeah. If a New Year's resolution is the impetus of change, if that's the thing that makes somebody want to be better and make themselves healthier, then I'm all for it. But it has to be something that can be sustainable. So anytime I work with somebody, that's always my first goal is, how do we make this a shift that they can manage? Because if we, like you were saying, if I start just cutting everything out and tell them everything you're doing is wrong, nothing about your life can stay, that can be a tough pill to swallow right off the bat. So we look for things that are easily attainable and sustainable, and then we build on top of that.
That's I've found that in the first few months that we've been doing this, that it is nice. You feel eased into it. And you don't really shame the person either, because everybody has their bad habits, whether they have to do with diet or exercise or another category of life. But it's about, that's what I always tell people, is it's about layering habits on top of each other. Because if you just try to go cold turkey and say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to be a totally different person, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do 26 things, that's not really going to work. It's not going to stick that way. You got to do one, and that's why you kind of that's why I recommend starting with something like Seeing You, because then you're making some fundamental changes that'll give you things like more energy, better health, and you'll be able to feel like you can do more with your day. Then the rest of that stuff kind of comes along.
Sure. Yeah. It'd be sort of like saying tonight that you want to run a marathon and signing up for one tomorrow. If you haven't been training for a marathon, it's going to be a tough day for you. So it's better to start with a attainable training schedule and work your way up to it, and that way your body and your mind are prepared for it. And that's kind of what I work on. It's not without its challenges. You can't see change if you're not willing to change, and so we do have to have some tough conversations once in a while. But mostly, if people are willing to listen to the things that I have to say, willing to start implementing them, then we have something we can work with.
That it's a great method. I recommend Dr. Williams heavily here. We're going to we got everybody in studio here, so we're looking good. We're going to take a break. We're going to regroup, and then we're going to talk more with Doc Williams. We're going to talk maybe about some NFL injuries too, because that's been a big discussion lately. It's really a discussion all the time, but it's been a big discussion lately. And with his unique approach, I wanted to discuss some injuries with him, specifically the Kirby Joseph injury, but the impetus of some injuries, because again, kind of like we were talking about earlier in the process, you have a tendency to look at results and then back up from there. He has a tendency to look at what the cause could be rather than the effect. So stick with us. You're listening to the Sports Intel radio show on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Dr. Michael Williams in studio, talking about health and health practices. And I wanted to talk about health and practices, because that's kind of been the discussion here at the Lions level of things. They do have a lot of injuries. I'm actually venturing to get this guy on our Thursday show, but there's a guy that with a company called Sports Info Solutions that he basically goes over a lot of the injury related analytics. So that might be part of a future discussion for us. But he had the Lions at number 2 as far as total games missed by their players this season. The Bears were actually number 1. And then he also has a more detailed metric that then evaluates who missed the games and basically the value of their appearance in the games. So then how many points each team misses out on. And I believe the Lions were like 10th on that side of the metric. But that's been such a big discussion, and we've had other people, Dr. Liao, who's a friend of the show and has been on several times talking about injuries. We've had a bunch of people that have talked about this. We've talked about it with Shane Graham, former player, and I think you would bring an interesting perspective to this, because a lot of people do it where they say, okay, well, yeah, he's got a knee injury. Here's what's going on with his knee. Here's the cartilage. Here's how I would address it as a surgeon, as a knee surgeon, or what have you. But there's a lot of things that are happening in the body that could be leading to some tendencies for somebody like Kirby Joseph, and then your body is off balance, off center, and then that leads to some issues with a knee, a hip, a tightness where you blow out an Achilles, whatever the injury is. So I'd like to kind of have you go through the process of obviously you don't have his medical charts or anything like that, but when you see an injury like that, kind of what thought process you go through.
Well, so the first thing I start with is the idea that anytime the body is under stress, it's going to be tightening up. Stress or a struggle equals tightness within the body. So if we can identify where that is, then we can start to narrow that down. With something like a knee, unless there is physical trauma to the knee, direct impact or something like that, it's usually not, in my experience, is the knee a lot of times is not the problem. It's where things sort of end up, where the injury happens, but it's not necessarily what the problem is. And that's sometimes why it's tough to get them to heal, because if you're trying to heal a knee and the knee is not the problem, it's gonna be continually aggravated until you understand what it is. I was using the example that if you have an apartment and there's a leak in an apartment on the top floor, it may not show up until it gets to the apartment on the bottom floor. And the apartment on the bottom is going to see all the results of it, but that's not where you fix the problem. You have to clean up the mess, but you still have to get up and find where the leak was coming from. So that's where I would start if I was to look at this, and that's where running that integrated urinalysis panel would be my first step, which is what I start with all of my new patients. And that would tell me things like, does his body have what it needs in order to heal and repair? So when you're asking the body to heal, the first question you need to ask is, does it have the parts and pieces that are necessary for healing to take place? And in that case, if you saw that there were some things missing, you would have to address that before you could ask the body to do anything differently than what it's doing.
There were a couple reasons that we have ongoing discussions about this. Dr. Williams and I do, and one of the things that kind of led me to thinking this would be a good fit to talk about it is you've talked about kind of the tie between having certain deficiencies in the body, not getting enough of a mineral or vitamin, and how that leads to tightness in a specific part of the body, and then that can help describe, okay, let's see, if you're going to make a certain area tight, then things in that chain or that area of the body are inherently going to get more pressure, more stress, more load. And the other part of that, and we can handle it in two parts, but the other part of that is I used to be, a weight lifter. I used to do a lot of different supplements, all clean supplements as far as legal and all that kind of stuff. No quote unquote supplements, but real supplements, but things like creatine and protein. And although you can have some short-term benefits from those things, and football players use a lot of those kinds of things typically because they're looking for a competitive advantage, that can also overload your system too. So thinking of those two things as somebody that covers the sports the way that I do, I thought, well, both of those things are probably present in a lot of these sports injuries.
Yeah, it makes me wonder with kind of the prevalence of something like creatine. Creatine can be aggravating to the kidneys, and I've had several players with these kind of chronic injuries, and one of the things that we've addressed is how much creatine they take, because if the kidneys are aggravated, it creates a muscle contraction that can irritate the lower back. One comes to mind. He was a baseball player, and he was having all of these low back issues, and they couldn't get him to resolve. And I saw him, and first thing I did was check the reflexes that would tell me whether the kidneys were struggling. There's an area across the lower back that would get tight if the kidneys are having a hard time. I felt that area, and he wanted to come off my table because they were so tight and so sensitive. And so I knew that he was having a kidney struggle, and we had to address that if we were going to fix his lower back. And to do it, that's when I asked him, I said, how much creatine are you taking? And he was trying to bulk up and was in the process of trying to get as much of it in as he could. And so he was taking a lot of it. And I said, you gotta lay off that for a while. And as soon as he did, his kidneys started to calm down, his back pain went away, and it was a relatively easy fix after that. But if you extend that a little further, that muscle contraction across the lower back, one of the things that's possible is it could create a distortion in the pelvis. It could create a tip or a tilt, and that would create tension that would travel down, depending on which way, if it tips backward or forward, it would tighten the muscles that go all the way down the front or the back of the leg, and could then create unnecessary stress or strain on the knee, on the ankle and the Achilles. And so that's a potential for some of these injuries that we're talking about.
It's just fascinating to talk about this stuff because as listeners of the show know, we like to kind of go to the root of things. We don't like to discuss what happened on that 4th and 7 play. The guy dropped it. That's kind of inherently a little uninteresting to me, I guess. And it's the same way with the injuries, to just say, okay, how do we explain these injuries? Is it the field? Well, they're all playing on roughly the same fields. There might be grass, and there might be turf, and there might be different impact there that then exacerbate another issue, but it's obviously not the primary issue. Otherwise, they'd all be getting hurt. Well, is it practice issues, practice intensity that's come up in the media recently with the Lions. And although they do practice hard, it's not like these other teams don't practice hard. Shane was talking about how this era practices a little less hard because of the rules of what you're supposed to do in the practices now that's now different. So it's like, okay, well, you could have, I guess you could have some issues with your body where you're kind of born with an issue, born with a bad knee, born with, bad stuff. But for the most part, it's, hey, you've got kind of the general same set of parts as everybody else, and it's how you maintain them over the years and how you treat them. So this is what I'm thinking though, Doc, because I think they have trainers to kind of treat all of the people afterwards, but they need somebody to help them at the dinner table, help them get their back straight, help them fix all the problems. The only problem is that's a longer commute for you to go to Detroit and do all that stuff. Otherwise, I'd petition for it. I think
maybe we could meet halfway.
Yeah, you have like a 5-minute commute right now. So, but no, I mean this stuff. I joke about it, but this stuff is all part of the process. It makes a lot more sense that your inside, that what you're putting in your body may have an impact rather than the field that you play on, or not that wouldn't have any effect, because they're having a lot of impact in general. They're getting hit every time. They're getting hit by other bodies. But you've talked about this in different appointments with me, how you would have people with the same injury where they kind of have the same effect on their body, but one heals differently. And so then if that happens in the NFL, which it does, some people get hit the same kind of way, but then one gets hurt, one doesn't. This is a way to kind of describe why there's differences there.
Right, sure. Yeah, if the impact itself creates disruptions in the function of the body, then you have to put those things back, and that's where treatment with chiropractic or physical therapy or some of the other modalities that are available would help to put those things back, and those are the players that usually recover relatively quickly. If there's some of these other deficiency type things, or these chronic digestive issues, or other chronic inflammatory things that are causing these problems, then those are the ones that are going to struggle to heal. They're not going to be able to recover as well, because that same issue is still active in the body. I was giving this some thought, and I was kind of thinking, one of the things I think it's part of this is that we're starting to see these guys play at an earlier age and at a higher level. And so if you have that deficiency, or if you have this imbalance, whatever it may be, once that's evident in the body, or once that starts in the body, you have whatever number of times that you're able to stress the body before something's going to happen. And where in the past that might not have started until you were 18 or 20 or a little bit later, and if you say you get 15 years of this, it would show up in your late 30s, early 40s, and maybe in retirement, and at least from the NFL, and you wouldn't see it. Now, with these guys starting earlier and playing tougher at an earlier age, that timeline gets moved up, and so you see some of these things showing up in early 20s athletes, but just because things are sort of accelerated based on when they started playing and the level at which they're playing at.
This is going to be a weird comparison, but there's something in professional wrestling that they call a bump card, even though it's obviously predetermined and all that. They still are taking real physical shots, and they do get their bodies get weathered, but they basically say, like, you can only take a certain bump or do something a certain amount of times, and then you're kind of done, because it's like your body is kind of given out. So that sounds like this concept a little bit. I'm wondering if, I know you've told me before that some of it too is these two things maybe coinciding, what you were talking about, and the fact that what you put in your body, you're a little bit more, just like when you're younger, you're more lithe, you're more flexible, you're more able to take some of that punishment. When you get older, your stomach is kind of the same way. It's been weathered a little bit, and it's like, okay, I can't process this stuff the way I used to when you were 18, and now I'm 30, 40 years old. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, we do see a little bit of diminished capacity as we age, and that's a normal part of the aging process. And we all this is true for everyone. We make less stomach acid as we get older. So the activity in the stomach, the activity of the whole digestive system does slow down somewhat as we get older. So it does mean that you're not going to be able to handle things quite as well at 25 as you did when you were 15, or 35 when you were 25, and so on. So there is that little bit diminished capacity, and that's why some of the things you can get away with in your 20s and feel okay the next day, you're not going to be able to get away with as you try to do it in your 30s or your 40s.
I think that's a concept that a lot of people that are a certain type of genarian, however many they are getting up to here with the decades, are able to relate to. But yeah, good stuff on the injuries. I thought we could do this because it does two things. It informs us about injuries. That's always something of interest for fans out there, because we want to explain what's happening to our sports teams. But more importantly, I know I'm saying this on a sports show, more importantly, this stuff is important to your own health. It's good to know about your own health and how it impacts your health. I've been learning a lot more about those things myself. So if people are interested in coming in and kind of starting the process based on what they've heard here today, how would you get started and where would you direct them here?
Sure, yeah. The easiest way to find me is on the website. It's williamschiropracticgr.com. You can see a little more about me, about my background and the methods that I use, and get a little more information. That way you can also schedule appointments right from the website.
It's a great service. I can't recommend it highly enough. Like I said at the beginning of the interview, when I wasn't sure if people could hear me, I got to make sure that it actually gets out on the radio and on the podcast. But I've been using Dr. Williams' services for a few months now, and I've experienced a good amount of weight loss and a lot better health. And so it's just good information. I think the key is to understand that a lot of your services are more about prevention, that, as far as like you want to try to get to things before they get worse, because I think people look at, well, okay, I'm fine, I'm good enough, but it's really about optimizing yourself and preventing bigger things down the road, so that you don't have these big injuries, big health issues that cost a lot more money and have a lot more compound effects.